Hey everyone, welcome. Let me do a quick check to see if I'm actually online right now. I think I should be. And YouTube, you're live. Cool. Nuaf Al Oriani, are you new, sir? Welcome. Noel, hi. Noel, glad to be here again. Glad you're all here. Um, let's see. Let's go to my channel here and make sure everything is being seen. Does appear as though we're live. Ah, very good. Very good. I'm an hour early. Actually not. It's 1 o'clock. Rob, you're in England, and we changed our clocks. We moved our clocks ahead. Um, I did send out an email earlier reminding everybody, especially my friends in Europe, uh, that we had done that in the U.S. and you guys in Europe have not. Um, so So I'm actually right on time, although for you guys in Europe, I'm an hour earlier than I normally am. So it's now Eastern time is now Greenwich Mean Time -4 when the normal time is 5. And I have no idea, but the U.S. we pushed up the day that we go on to daylight savings time by a month and pushed it back by a month. I'm not really sure what that was all about. I'm a fan for just getting rid of it because 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 it's just too ridiculous. Um, so at any rate, I suspect that there will be some people who will be showing up an hour from now. I've done that. I've shown up to appointments an hour late, and I'm like, well, what can I say? So so there it is. Very 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 crazy. And somebody just said, "Fulgar, hour earlier works for me." It's 10 p.m. here. Yeah, otherwise it would be 11. So as we're getting into our satsang vibe here, we're getting into the the spirit and energy of satsang. Um, I always want to take the opportunity in the beginning to remind people that, you know, in our normal everyday lives, um, we are so absorbed in phenomena in the external world and the stuff that we have to do and the places that we have to go and people that we have to see and stuff that has to get done that we really don't allow ourselves much time for the kind of contemplation that is the mainstay, the essence of satsang. Satsang means communion with truth, and it simply means a communion with your real truth. What it means is that while we're very busy working out in the world and doing things that needs to happen out in the world, let there be a part of you that is simply aware of yourself. Now, when I say aware of the self, I don't mean aware of ideas you have about yourself, right? Your history, your experiences, your education, your associations, your memories, even your relationships, the roles you play, the father, mother, sister, brother, daughter, son, employer, employee. Um, None of the things that we normally define ourselves until all of that set aside, there's just nothing left except this feeling of being, this simple, unmistakable, unchanging sense of simply being. Now, it's not very interesting to the mind. It doesn't seem to have much relevance to the world out there and all the things that have to happen and the stuff that we have to do. But if you just take a moment to be with it, It has a key attribute to it that makes it pretty extraordinary and worth pondering. And that attribute is it's changeless. Everything in your external experience comes and goes. It fluctuates. It's changing. And changing constantly. Sometimes it's slow enough that, you can depend on it for a bit of stability for a period of time. But everything eventually, even in a stable form, eventually deteriorates. The reality is there's no such thing as a stable form. It doesn't matter how thinly you slice time, you will never find an object. You will only find a flow. And the flow takes form, and that form looks like it has solidity, and it looks like it has stability. But they don't really. Nothing does, except that sense of being. Now this is a direct experience that you can have right this second. The significance of it, the ramifications of it, can often take a while to sink in, especially when we're very identified with the person in the world doing things, that this quiet, still, changeless, indescribable something is always present. And you're always present with it. You're the one that's actually recognizing its unchangeableness, which means it's you. Because there's not somebody else recognizing it. You're recognizing your own unchangeless nature. The fact that it is changeless, formless, not confined to space and time, puts it completely outside of all of our mental models, all of our self-concepts, all of our self-images, all our definitions of ourselves and others. It is something completely different, and yet you are there. That's where you are. Now, since it is changeless, it means it's never disturbed. It's never agitated. No matter what happens out here, this remains absolutely stable. Now, isn't that kind of stability and certainty and stillness, isn't that what we're all seeking? The thing is, you can't take that which is not still and make it still. You can't take something that's false and make it true. You can't take something that's impermanent and make it permanent. The only thing that can be permanent is that which is permanent. The only thing that is changeless is that which is changeless. The shift that has to take place, the shift that they call the awakening, is the recognition that that stable, changeless, timeless place is yourself. It is from there that your entire life, indeed every lifetime you've ever had, has been witnessed, has been seen. It is that which has been experiencing the countless, that endless flow of experience, which is life, which is the coming and going of all things. That which has been experienced, all of that, has never come and gone. It is inconceivable. Simply that. It is inconceivable. You cannot think about it. You can only be it. And it is what you are. I invite you all to regularly and and frequently simply let yourself sink into this mysterious place. Set aside the past, the future. Set aside all self uh, definitions. Set aside your ambitions and your desires and all of that. Set aside all of your memories and the traumatic material. And in this moment, set aside all of the feelings and sensations and thoughts that are going through you. And notice that there is a very real, a very palatable place from which all of those are being seen. And that place is utterly stable, utterly constant. That's you. That is the real you. Now, the recognition of that inevitably brings up the habits of thought. Right? When I speak about the mind, and I say that, the mind speaking and all of that, what I'm referring to are patterns of thought. Okay? That's all the mind is. Just like every object you see is actually a pattern of energy, isn't it? Because there's tiny particles and subatomic particles and all these things that are whizzing around that gives the illusion of a particular a form, and a form that is relatively stable. The same thing is true of thoughts. There's no mind. Mind does not exist as a thing. There are clear patterns of thought, and thought is just a subtle energy that forms patterns just like everything else in the universe. I mean, the sun is nothing but a conditioning of the molecules in a certain form, and in that form it has this function. It generates light. Our thoughts operate exactly the same way. They're simply a pattern of a pattern that has formed, that consciousness is aware of. And one of those patterns that it's formed is simply a self-image, a sense of being a separate self, that is, this body. But that too is just a pattern of thought. It is just a way of thinking about experience. And in an exercise where you simply remove yourself, you stand back from all thought and sensation and memory and expectation and all that, to see what remains. When it isn't thought, when it isn't emotion, when it isn't experiential out here, but is just as deep as you can possibly go within yourself till you can't go any farther. And when you can't go any farther, you are at the end. You are at that which is just you. And since we're all seeking that kind of stillness and stability, and we've probably at least heard, if not seen directly for ourselves, that there is no such thing as stillness and stability in the world of form, well then this is it. This is the place that we've all been looking for. It doesn't necessarily fit our expectations, right? The heavens aren't parting, the angels aren't singing, there isn't, colors and lights and dancing girls or dancing boys, if it's your preference, right? There's just stillness. There's just I amness. There's just beingness. And for the expectation of the mind wanting the big explosion, that can be a little bit of a disappointment. Come on, give me something big. give me something big instead of something just utterly small. Well, anyway, to the mind, this is kind of a disappointing discovery. Because it wants the fireworks, it wants the special effects. But What if you don't get any? What if it is, instead of big special effects, which come and go, right? They're impermanent like anything else. A an extraordinary peak experience, right? Which could be, could be plant medicine, could be a near death, it could be falling in love, it could be giving birth. But in these intense peak experiences that people can have, do they not all come and go? So what is the only thing that doesn't come and go? That is where you want to invest your heart. That is where you want to invest your hope, your your desire for spiritual awakening, which is the desire to find happiness that is consistent. Well, where else is it going to be except in the one place you know of that is consistent? So let's see what we got in terms of highs and questions here. Greetings from Vienna, from Max. Greetings from Madeira Island, from Ursula. Greetings from Bulgaria, from Canada with Sukita. And Ursula is in Madeira. Jess M says, much love from Monterey. Much love to you too. Rob, I got an eye infection a year ago, left me with impaired vision in one eye. Despite it happening a year ago, I find myself identifying with a character that is filled with self-pity. I try not to identify with the negative dialogue, but it feels easier to go along with the negative flow, even though it makes me feel bad. How do I break this pattern? Well, that feeling that it's easier to go along with the negative flow is part of the flow, right? All that does, well, it is easier in the sense of it's easier to go along with a habit than it is to deny a habit, right? Anybody's ever tried to quit smoking or drinking or any kind of addiction or habit that has negative consequences, which is what an addiction is, something you can't stop that has negative consequences. Anybody who's tried to stop that can tell you it's a whole lot easier to go along with it than to resist it, because that's what it wants. It's looking for that hit, right? It's coming up and looking for the hit. So the energy that wants to identify with the person in self-pity, right, is looking to be fed. Now just notice that is the actual impulse. There is a very powerful impulse in every human being to identify with the person. Any person, whether it be self-aggrandizing or self-degrading, this impulse to identify is the heart and soul of the sense of a separate self. It's the heart and soul of the ego. Because you see, the ego or the separate self doesn't have any real substance to it. Right? So that feeling, right, of identification is going to feel insecure. It's going to feel out of sorts. And if it has identified with the self-pity in any form, at any time before, and has gotten you to go along with it, right, it knows how to play that card. It knows how to push that button. And there's thoughts, the feelings, why did this happen to me? This was horrible, this isn't fair, I didn't do anything to bring this about, right? So notice the negative dialogue, but also notice something more subtle. There is a very quiet, almost silent impulse to identify with the negative dialogue. And that impulse is the real problem. It's not the negative dialogue that's a problem, right? Because that could come, and if it had no hook for you, you would just see it and not pay any attention to it. But it does come. But not only does it come in the form of those thoughts in your head, it also comes in the form of emotions and physical sensations in the body. just kind of a draining of energy, little bit of a depression, just kind of a I give up, right? All of those are the entire picture of the separate self trying to define itself. And right now it's trying to define itself as the victim, as this unfair thing happened to me. Now you can take that a step further. Something did happen, right? You got an infection that left you with impaired vision. Did that happen to you, or did it happen to this body? Right? Who did this actually happen to? Or is this simply, you know, a car ran? I mean, look, I'm, I don't look the way I used to, right? I'm not as quick-witted as I used to be. My body doesn't do the things it used to do. It takes me a lot longer to lose weight than it used to. All of these things are transformations taking place. When we identify with those, we feel as if we're losing something. But I look at it for a second and I go, well, yes, my mind's not as quick. Something is there that knew all of it, registered all of it, and is saying, well, it's quicker now. It's not as quick now as it was then. What's that? What's that's aware of all of these differences? And is that actually touched by all of those? That's the thing to try to grasp. Right? There's a feeling that wants to drag your attention and identification into the dialogue and the feelings. Okay. Once the feelings arise, there's a sense, before our spiritual discernment matures a little bit, there's a sense that suddenly, oh, I'm in it, now I've got to try to get out of it. But that's not true. You're not in it. It is appearing in front of you. But there's this feeling that says, here it is again. How do I get out of this? The moment you ask that question, you're stuck. It's flypaper, right? You're not in it. If you were in it, you couldn't see it. You'd just be the victim. You'd just be playing out the role of self-pity. It would be who you are. But the very fact that you're going, well, there it is. There's this negative dialogue and these feelings are coming up. But what you haven't got yet is that from that place, you are not subject to them. You are the witness of them. Now, just let go of trying to get rid of them. Let go of trying to change it. Let go of identifying with it, that this is a problem that I have to solve, that why in the world is this still happening to me? Completely withdraw from the entirety of the dialogue and see where you're actually standing. You are actually standing in this place of pure awareness. Aware of that. Now, there's a very subtle place there, because there's the pure awareness that has no preference. It has no issue with anything that's happening. There's another place that we get when we're not fully, when we're fully identified. I'm just a guy who's feeling sorry for himself. Right? When I'm not so fully identified, I feel the sense of distance, but I still have a vested interest in how it plays out. So yeah, I'm not that guy, but I want this to go away. I want to feel more like who I am. There's another place, another step back. Because notice, even that you can see. That too can be perceived. So it's still on this side of the lens. Take one more step back to the sense of pure awareness. That is, awareness that has no vested interest, no attachment to anything that's happening. It is seeing through absolutely clear, crystal clear eyes. Because it doesn't have a favorite, it's not taking sides, it has no issue, this should stay, this can go, I like this, I don't like that. All of those are the witness with attachment. And of course, it's a better place than being totally identified with it. But if you really want to be free, we have to go now beyond the witness that has attachments. You know, yes, it's good. I'd rather be free of this than not, of course. So obviously, it's a step forward, right? But the one who is wanting to be free of it, right, is still identified with it. Now take a step back and notice that that energy of identification is itself just another flow of energy through the system. But the awareness, the pure awareness of it, is not a flow of energy. It is not a thing that changes. It is not even an energy field. You can't describe this in any way because it is not in space or time. So, identifying with the awareness, you won't have to try to not identify with the negative dialogue. There won't be anybody there who has to try to not identify. The identification itself will be seen from the completely unidentified infinite self itself, which is who you actually are. Is that helping you, Rob? Is that getting you back where we want? Dave Maloney, and I'm picking him first because because the super chat on this thing. I'm still trying to figure out how to actually get the money from it. But where'd you go, David? Where's your question? There it is. Hold on. Where'd you go? Oh, there it is. Hi, G. Thanks for the help last week. Insight opened things up during the week. Ah, very good. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Let me continue with what you... Wondering, G, is it necessary to work on letting go of the persona before awareness becomes the default perspective? People pleasing, trying to be good or nice, nasty or vicious, ego is obvious. However, the persona often sounds attractive and is trickier as an issue. Yes, it is. And it's trickier because there are aspects of what we call the person. See, the person is a projection on life, right? Getting rid of the person doesn't mean getting rid of life, right? Dissolving the belief in yourself as a separate self doesn't mean you're suddenly going to become void of preference, that you're not going to like doing what you used to do. You might not, but that all your individuality is just going to go away. That there's going to be that everything is just going to become homogenized. Exactly the opposite takes place. The person is the false belief that the experience of form, that form is a self-existent, self-aware entity. So I, as consciousness, I am aware. I am aware of all of this happening. That consciousness, when it is not awake, believes that it is confined within this body. I am this body. And therefore, all of the characteristics of life, every characteristic of this form, of this particular form, its gifts, its thoughts, its problems, all of that now belong to this consciousness. Now, without that identification, what's actually happening? Does this disappear? If I become enlightened, are there no more rainstorms? No. Absolutely, it continues. This form continues. Right? There's just no more identification with it. Nisargadatta put it beautifully. He said, I allow my human life to fulfill its destiny. I remain as I am. So the human form continues. The form is beautiful, isn't it? You know, I mean, look at all the beautiful things in life, the innovations, the wondrous accomplishments, the experience of deep intimate relationships, the experience of beauty, the experience of awakening itself is extraordinary. It's a beautiful, wonderful experience. But who's having the experience? Consciousness is having the experience. The self is having the experience. Right? And what is being experienced is not a self, any more than the image on a screen in the movie theater is a self. It's a representation. The self is always the one that is watching. That's where selfhood lies. So, letting go of the person, is it necessary to work on letting go of the person, of the persona, before awareness becomes the default perspective? It's kind of this, right? An insight into myself as pure awareness will dissolve the person, right? And it's always, the letting go of the person always results out of some kind of an insight, because if you hadn't had that insight, me saying to let go of the person would be, what? Because you're so identified with the person, let go of what? It would make no sense whatsoever, right? So it's always awareness that is letting go of the person. It's never the person letting go of the person. So when you say, is it necessary for you to work on that, who's the you are referring to? Right? We imagine that there's this pure awareness, and then there's this person, right? And that I'm in the middle of these, trying to get to awareness and trying to disidentify from the person. And that entire scene of the awareness I'm trying to get to, and the person that's trying to get there, and the person that is you're disidentifying from, it's all being seen from awareness, by awareness. The seeker and the seeking are both being perceived by that which is sought. The entire thing is playing itself out in front of consciousness, is it not? Right? Is it playing out in front of unconsciousness? So the only question is, which is you? Am I the one witnessing it on this side of the lens, or am I out here in the street fight on that side of the lens? Where are you? Right? Again, St. Francis of Assisi, what you are looking for is where you are looking from. And it's very, very subtle, isn't it? Because we come to think about awakening or awareness or enlightenment or, knowing God as this thing that then there's this me here trying to get to it, right? Now, if you stand back for a second, this me that's trying to get to it is being perceived by something, isn't it? Well, it's being perceived by is the thing that this is trying to get to. So you're already there. Right? Just become increasingly clear. And this is very subtle. That's a very subtle thing to notice, isn't it? That there's an imaginary self trying to get rid of the imaginary self. Who's the self? You. The one who's hearing my words right now. The one who's looking at this, registering on the screen. That which is where this is all registering on is obviously consciousness, right? But we've mistaken this consciousness for the person. It is pure consciousness that is seeing, always. There's just thoughts about that consciousness that say it's limited, it's finite, it's struggling, it's on the way, it's close but not there yet, right? Can you see? All constructions of the mind, none of which could appear were you not here first looking at them. Does that help, Dave? Somebody else made a nice little donation. Oh, Rob made a donation. Thank you. Yeah, you're very welcome. I hope that got to the got down more deeply for you on that, because It's a tough. It can be tough when things happen to us and we don't see that there's any reason why they should. Well, the reason is always. Uh, the reason is always. I'll turn up. Somebody said the volume's a little low. I'll push it up a little bit. When something happens to us that's untoward, that doesn't seem fair, comes out of nowhere, doesn't seem to be have any real cause to it. What we are experiencing is simply the nature of life itself, the impermanent nature of all form and existence. There's nothing ever that guaranteed that your life was just going to be one wonderful thing after another. And the seeking of one wonderful thing after another is delusional. And so when something comes out of nowhere that hinders us in some way, we lose some faculty that we really relied on. We can say, well, we can look to circumstance, try to see what the cause is. We can't really find a cause there and go, well, why is this happening? Well, ultimately, the reason it's happening is to remind you that this is impermanent and that you cannot put your faith, your trust, and your source of happiness in anything that is impermanent, because all of this is going to fall away. Nothing is forever. Nothing is permanent except you. Experience, by definition, is something that comes and goes. So why do things happen to us untoward? To remind us where we need to actually be investing our heart and our energy. Do not invest in that which is going to be shifting and changing. Do not put your future, right, your awakening, your sense of self into that which is completely unstable. And then don't spend your life trying to make that which is unstable into something that is stable. It's a fool's errand. It will never, ever, ever work. So when things just happen to us, that doesn't mean I just resign yourself. It's not that kind of a thing. You do anything you can to correct it, to bring it as much stability as you possibly can, but then realize that there's a point at which you can't. I look at the things in my life, really some horrific things that happened, completely unfair, completely unjustified, right? I suppose if you examined everything psychologically enough, you could find causal connection, all that. But for the most part, it was just, why is this happening to me? And yet, when I look at the impact that it had on me, and how powerfully it acted on how strong my hold on my ego was, I see now why it had to be that way. That kind of loss, that kind of deprivation, because it took that much suffering in order to break that shell that I was very attached to. So, the reason anything happens is to guide you more deeply into knowing who you really are. No matter how adverse or unfair it may seem, ultimately, it is the greatest gift you're ever going to get. It is your guru. Right? Let go of how you think things are supposed to go, and you will never be unhappy again. Let's see. Janet says, hello, tuning in from Glasgow. Yeah, somebody else who may have not have noticed that it was an hour early. Jay's Portraits says, awareness. Okay. Audio is a bit quiet from John David. Is that still true for everyone? I did push it up a little bit. Is it okay? Hopefully. All right. Nazarene, hi from Ireland. Hi, Nazarene. Good to have you here. Finally made it, says Anne. Good. Wonderful. Hi, GP from PD Vids. Can you thank you for answering my questions. I was wondering how to end my fear of death and depression. I go into it. I go into it to feel it, but it always comes back. I just want to feel connected. Well, you're don't try to get rid of the fear of death because the fear of death is a consequence. And the fear of lack and depression, that depression, which is simply just a feeling of energy, of not having any power, right? Just kind of like a withdrawing, right? Those are secondary. Those are what emerge when an identification with the sense of a separate self happens. When I identify with the body, and this happens very early in childhood, we start to identify with the body. At that moment, the body's destiny, the body's weaknesses, the body's problems, body's limitations become my weaknesses and problems and limitations. Not because they really are, because I'm infinite consciousness, but because I have identified myself with a finite form. Inevitably, then, will come the fear of death and the fear of lack. It's inevitable because this body does die. This body can be in situations where it goes without. So it isn't just about feeling it consistently until it goes away, right? If you're completely in a state of allowing, where you allow yourself to feel these things, they won't have the impact on you that they normally would. But they're not really going to be completely eliminated until you know yourself as deathless consciousness. If you're not deathless consciousness, then death is a very imminent thing. And what do we mean by death? For most people, it's just this big unknown. It's this a void. It's oblivion. It's not existing at all. For the strict materialist, the many atheists, not all of them, but many atheists, some just don't believe in God. Some believe completely in the material model. That when this body ends, when it can't sustain itself anymore and it falls apart, that you cease to exist. Period. Nothing. Right? It is just void. Right? It won't like you get there and go, I've died, because you're not there. I mean, really ending. And that's really what people feel. Ideas of what happens after death and the like. The real solution is the answer to the question, well, who am I? Am I this body? That's why that question, am I the body, has been a mainstay of non-dual spiritual inquiry, from the get-go. Right? Am I my thoughts? Am I my emotions? Am I my body? Now, if you look at it, thought, emotion, and sensation is the sum total of experience. Right? There's nothing we experience outside of that. We imagine there are things outside of that, but the only way we know about them is through this veil of our experience, and that experience is completely sensation, emotion, and thought. And in fact, when you look at all three of those, what you're looking at is simply different vibratory frequencies of exactly the same thing. So what we're really talking about is we are just experiencing different waves of vibration. That's it. That is what you are experiencing. Are you that? Are you the vibration that is being experienced, or are you the one that is experiencing it? And can you see that they're not the same? That's the whole crux of an inquiry like this. What it means, am I my body? Am I nothing but a bunch of sensations? Which would mean that I'm a sensation. Well, then who's perceiving the sensation? Is the ultimate perceiver itself a sensation? Well, all sensations can't exist independently, can they? Something has to be there to have the sensation. Right? The same is true of emotion and thought. something has to be there, because thoughts don't think themselves, sensations don't sense themselves, and emotions don't feel themselves. Something else feels them. Is that a thought, a sensation, or an emotion? And if not, then what is it? And it doesn't take much to examine it to see that it is quite different. That which is experiencing these things is quite different from them, simply because while all of those things come and go, you don't. If you were a thought, when the thought went, you'd go. Same thing with emotion, same thing with the sensation. So you're not any of those. So you're not the body. All right. So you can completely withdraw your attention. What is true about the body is not true about you. What's true about thoughts, not true about you. What's true about all emotions, not true about you. Okay. So I've just ruled all of that out. So now, if I'm ruling out all of that, then how do I know myself? How do I know me? Because it's clear that I'm the one that is perceiving these. If I'm not the body, then what am I? And how do I come to see what I am without any reference whatsoever to thought, emotion, or sensation? Because none of those, I'm not like any of those. Their description doesn't fit me. Nothing a sensation can do will describe the consciousness that is aware of the sensation. So now my thought has become completely removed from a phenomena, and it is completely focused on that which is not a phenomena, that to which all the phenomena is appearing. And so even the way in which we know ourselves is not subject-object relationship, because you couldn't know yourself as subject and object. You'd have to be a subject, and you would have to be the object, which is exactly the case. So all of that, classical analysis, scientific method, double-blind tests, none of these are valid here. It is completely your own direct experience, and sorting out, eliminating all of the thoughts that were based on you as body, emotion, and mind. Does that which is aware of all of this die? Can it end? And of course, you can't look to time, right? I'll wait until this body collapses and see if I'm still here. Right? It's kind of unsatisfying. Because if not, then you'll never know. Right? You either not ever know, or you'll know that you're still here. Right? Does it ever end? The only way you can actually even investigate that is through your direct experience. Right? So this place of pure seeing, of pure watching, of pure awareness, just with your attention there, and not trying to give it any additional qualities other than that, does it feel to you like it ends? For most people, really coming to that place of just that sensing of the pure presence of being, it doesn't feel like it ends. Now again, it's not scientific. I can't prove this. I can't get little worksheets and the like. Nobody can. Right? But intuitively, instinctively, I go, no, I can't find a beginning to it. I can't find an end. No birth, no death. I can't find, it doesn't seem to have any color. It doesn't have any purpose. I can't photograph it. It doesn't have any beliefs. It doesn't have any physicality. And yet it's very present. It's very real. What is it? It's myself. That's it. It isn't a thing that can be defined in any other way. It is being itself, which is, it is the I am. It is yourself. How's that, PD? Jess M. Can you share on any experience you've had with plant medicine. I've been drawn to connect through many synchronicities with ayahuasca. Timing feels right on my path. Any insights to share? Um, I have many friends who are shamans, many who are actually facilitators. They're not full-fledged shamans, but they're facilitators. Good friend who's part of the Native American Church, where this is. I'm still getting a thing about not loud enough yet, I guess. Huh? All right. And it's a very important way of life, and has been for indigenous tribes. Um, the big difference is in those tribes, Native American and South American and the like, and other Aboriginal cultures that have used psychedelics, natural plant medicines. Um, they've been integrated into the culture. They served a role, right? Uh, that's really what's missing from its entry into the West. It's kind of this mixture of psychology and New Age stuff and trying to self-discovery. It doesn't have the same kind of roots here in the West as it did culturally in the other countries. So what key is with that is the context in which it happens. Anybody who says they want to do plant medicine, I don't tell anybody no. Um, uh, but what I say is that make sure you're prepared. Do you have a meditation practice? Do you have any kind of regular contemplation? Um, what are the question? What is it that you're actually hoping to get from it? Most people want to just simply have a greater sense of freedom and some help breaking through some inner blocks. Uh, they can do that. But bear this in mind. No matter how intense or profound the experience is, it is just an experience. It is an influence, but it is not the final step. I know of no one who has actually come to a full awakening through plant medicine. I know people who have come to that and then they don't need it anymore. I've known of people who have, like Zen masters, who have done plant medicine and say, yeah, that's good. Right? But anytime you're relying on something external to yourself, the results are going to be temporary. So it's not that I'm saying don't do it. It's not it can't help. It can, right? But it is not the end all. The ultimate, the direct path is the direct path, and the direct path is this inquiry that we're talking about here now. Who am I? Because whether you're having an ayahuasca journey or a mushroom journey or sun pager or one of the numerous kinds of plant medicines that are available, there will always be a you that is experiencing it. And that you is what needs to be known. Right? And while experiences can help to that, they're like any other teaching. They are a pointer. They are temporary. All dharmas are empty. All teaching is empty. That means there's nothing inherently absolutely true about any teaching. It is always relative to the person and the circumstances and the culture. Right. So make sure you are with an experienced shaman, not just somebody who, they did 100 acid trips and now they think they're a shaman. Somebody who really is, who's been training. The people I know were like 10 years in training, right? Even one, and for ayahuasca, the diet is 1 year. 1 year living in a hut, and all they do is have this certain kind of food, and the shaman is just this diet because they are establishing relationships with these plants. They're not just, oh, it has this effect, I'm gonna do it. That's part of the problem with these things coming in the West, is that this culture is not nearly as introspective, right? So we're so consumer-oriented, so externally focused, that I think a lot of the advantage can actually be lost. So that's what I would have to say about it. I think there's a certain point in your spiritual growth where it simply won't be of any benefit whatsoever. It'd be like taking an aspirin when you don't have a headache, right? Um, Remember, it is medicine, right? And these medicines are not like the drug companies. They're not trying to make customers, right? They want you on this medicine forever. It's a medicine. And medicine means you take it until you get the cure, right? I often refer to this as anti-inflammatory medicine for highly inflamed egos, right? And so to to uh, to use it in that regard is a positive thing, but there will come a point where you can drop it, right? So if you're drawn to it right now, have the experience. Just make sure that it's a safe, supportive environment, that the person who is leading knows what they're doing, does have some traditional experience with it, um, and and take your time. I know people who do it a couple times a week, right? Every weekend they're off on their next journey. Terence McKenna, who is a big proponent of mushrooms, said once every 6 months, 5 grams dried mushrooms, alone in a dark room, once every 6 months. That sounds more reasonable to me. If it's a profound experience, it's going to take time for it to really integrate and colonize the whole system. Because remember, a peak experience, if it meets with the unchallenged um, uh, habit patterns and projections of the mind, right, and those have not been those assumptions have been questioned, the experience will just be, wow, that was a great experience, man, and it'll be forgotten. If there is a groundwork of seeing, of looking deeply into our habitual patterns and trying to see through them, then there's an opening for the integration of a peak experience to have more than just to be more than just a temporary experience, that it actually can have a healing and transformative effect by bringing fresh insight into the entire nervous system. So hope that answers it for you. How are we doing on? Let me scroll down to the bottom real quick. How are we doing on volume? Are we doing good? Damn, if McKenna says that, it means something. It says 8.1. That's very funny. That's very funny. Yes, I like Terrence McKenna, but he had some problems. Yeah, he had some problems. He actually died with a mushroom-shaped tumor in his brain. The whole thing is very strange, but brilliant, and yeah, it's a fun read. Let's see. Ape said, I'm glad I didn't miss it this time. Let's see what we got here. Dave. Okay. A bit louder. There I am. It's hard for me to keep. I'm scrolling through here trying to keep track of where everything is. Noel says, is reincarnation a belief or truth? Well, okay. And you even capitalized truth. So I'm thinking that was on purpose that you capitalized truth. Okay. Here is the only truth. The truth and only truth, the capital T truth, is you, your existence. That is the truth. Okay? Truth simply refers to that which is real, right? Not an appearance of something else, right? So if I make a picture with paints, it's an appearance of something else, right? I've just kind of conditioned certain colors and shapes and lines to give the appearance of something else. What is the truth of that picture? Well, the truth of the picture is the artist, the canvas, the paints, all of it. But ultimately, it comes down to you. What is the experience that is more than experience? The reality. What is the reality? That's what the truth is. Now, as I did in the beginning of this thing, if you withdraw your attention from thought, which is not true, right? They're simply beliefs. There's nothing about a thought that makes it true or false. Something else has to. If you look at the same thing with your emotions and your sensations, where's the truth in them? The truth is something that is the real, which means it's not fluctuating. It doesn't become not truth, or this is true and now something else is true. Truth is self-sustaining, right? I mean, the difference between a belief and a truth is a belief requires somebody to believe it, right? Whereas a truth does not. Nobody believes in the entire world believes a certain thing to be true, and it's true. It's still true. Right? It does not require anyone's agreement for it to be true. It is self-sustaining, right? It is self-luminous. Right? This is the nature of truth, and of course, humanity has sought truth forever. Where else are we going to find stability and solidness except in that which is absolutely unchangingly true, whether I believe it or not? So when you're talking about truth, you are talking about you, the truth of you, the reality of you. Now, you may know that reality or not. You may have thoughts that conform with it. You may not. It doesn't change the truth of you is, right? This is the great promise. This is the good news, right? You cannot change what the truth is. So now we look at all of our experiences, right? And what is the truth of our experience? Well, that's not quite the same, right? Now, I experience multiple lifetimes. Consciousness experiences what we call multiple lifetimes. If I believe that there is a me, a individualized me, ephemeral, it's a soul of some sort, that's in this body and identified with this body, then this body dies. It goes through a little static period, and then it gets inside of another body. That's what people think of as reincarnation. They think that I am this entity, this ephemeral entity, definitely a form of some sort, definitely an individual distinct from you, definitely a separate self, and that the universe and the world are the constant, and they're always here. And so I come into this world, I do some things, and then I die, right? And I come back in, and even time has gone, right? So people say, well, you had 500 years ago you had a life, and so you went to this other place, time kept marching on, you came back later, right? 1948 or something like that, right? So this is how we see it. We see the constant, that there is a constant. So in that particular model, the earth, the world, is the truth. That is the constant. And I am the variable that's going in and out of it. But now that's not actually your experience. Your experience is you are simply you. You are there. You are formless. And a world appears to you. And all sorts of things happen in that world, right, over a period of time. And then it disappears. And there's back to just nothing but pure being. Right? That's what we call reincarnation. Right? The truth is you've never incarnated in the first place. You never entered a body. Any more than when you dream at night and you're walking around, you're not in a body. It is completely a subjective experience. While you're in the dream, you believe yourself to be in the body. You believe that you are that body. Right? But then when you wake up, you realize you weren't. That's exactly what's happening here. Only we're not just talking about, like in a dream, you have a bunch of different dreams, right? Different nights, and on the same night, you can go very quickly from one little scenario to another, right? So what's the difference with this? It's happening all the time. In what appears to be this life, how many lives have you led? How many different experiences have you had? How many births and deaths have you had? I'm not a teenager anymore. The teenager that I was is dead. The world is as foreign to me now as my 3 lifetimes ago. Right? We just kind of arbitrarily set this time, but when this body dies, I could see a whole series of bodies that have come and gone. But where have I been the entire time? So when you think about identification with form and truly waking up, you're waking up from the dream of all incarnations, not just one. You're waking up from the dream that you were ever anybody who incarnated in the first place. The world has always appeared to you. It is always in consciousness. Consciousness doesn't come in and out of a world. The world is not the static place. You are. And just feel into that. Feel into the truth of it. Where is the truth? Well, the truth is that which is. Absolutely is. And known to be. Only the truth can know the truth. The truth needs to recognize the truth. Right? Because truth is just, some fact without some consciousness aware of it. What the heck is that? Truth and consciousness are one. You cannot separate them. So being, consciousness, truth, Sat, Chit, Ananda, they are all one. And there is neither incarnation nor reincarnation. From that perspective. From the perspective of experience, it is simply the appearance of many forms, coming and going, coming and going, coming and going. And if I'm not identified with it, they can come and go all they want. I am the truth. None of the incarnations are the truth. They're only an appearance. So, thanks for answering, says Noel. You're welcome. Liza. Hello, Liza. La Signora Dane. Hey, G. Jonathan here from South Wales, UK. Good to be here with you again. Good to have you, my friend. Ape 108. Didn't miss it this time. Good. PD Viz says, I don't understand when people say the body appears in consciousness. How can I expand my consciousness from being felt in a head to feeling it felt everywhere? Well, rather than setting out to try to feel it everywhere, which is really just you're kind of creating an image that you want to now inhabit, you're basically imagining something. Reality doesn't need to be imagined, right? It doesn't need to be visualized. It's what's real, right? In order to experience reality directly, we have to challenge the images that have been superimposed on it. Now, the way to do that is to simply go directly to what your actual experience is. So, there is the experience of existing, right? Everybody has it. Everybody has this sense I am. This knowing that you exist without anybody having to verify it. It's like the existing and the knowing are like one thing. I am and I know that I am. Right? Now, on that empty knowing of I know I am and I know that I am is projected who that I is that is and knows that it is. Right? But now go directly just to the experience of being. There is an experience of having a head, right? Clearly, there's an experience of having the body. If I close my eyes and feel it, I can even feel it. There's an energy field here that I am experiencing. Now, with your eyes closed, it's a little easier because without the eyes, there's no form. Form is completely a visual function. Without the eyes, I couldn't really say I have a head. I have an awareness of things. Now just look for yourself with your eyes closed. feeling just the sense of this field of experience. And this experience of a boundary that we call the head, is it actually any different of an experience than say the wall of the room around you, or just kind of the feeling of the air, or the sounds that seem to be coming from the outside? From the point of view of the consciousness that is aware of it, what's the difference between this sense of a boundary of the head and the sound of my voice? At the level directly of conscious experience, what's the difference between those two experiences? From the point of view of the direct experience, there's no difference whatsoever. So what is the difference between them? The difference is simply what thought has said. Thought says, this is a boundary, and I am compressed within it. Okay, is it a boundary? Or is it something that's simply being experienced? Now there's the sense of this energy presence. Is it a boundary? Or is that just a thought about it? Is there anything in the actual experience itself that says, I'm a boundary? Or is it just an experience? So take all the thought away from it. Don't assume that there's a boundary there and I'm trying to get beyond it, which is going to be kind of futile. Question whether or not there actually is a boundary, or if there's just a particular energetic vibration that I am experiencing within consciousness. And is that vibration any different, really, than any other vibration? This is how you directly examine what you're actually experiencing, and removing from it all the thoughts about it, without trying to put another thought in it. You're not trying to, oh, here's it, okay, there's no boundary, and I'm trying to imagine there being no boundary. Don't do that either, right? The basic assumption is that you are compressed within this skull. Okay, we want to find out if that's true, right? But we have to find out that if that's true subjectively. Objectively, nobody's going to agree with you. Oh yeah, of course you are. There you are, right? Is that your actual experience? Or is this head that we believe ourselves to be confined within itself simply an energetic pattern being experienced in consciousness? And examine it. That's all you can do, is keep examining it. Okay, how do I know? How do I know that this really is a hard limit, that there's really this boundary here, and I'm not just dreaming it, dreaming this head? And is it actually there? But it's totally subjective. You just have to keep looking for yourself. Okay, the mind says it is, everybody tells me it is, and I've believed that it is. So I've just been assuming that that's what it is. Is that what it is? Take all those assumptions away. How would I know? Well, I have to give it my attention. I have to really look at it. Feel it. Experience it as it actually is. And you do that, and you will find there is no object anywhere that inherently tells you it exists independently from your consciousness. Nothing does. When you see things as they are, you cannot say, they are not announcing to you their origin, where they're coming from. That's all being projected on them. So you're not trying to expand your consciousness. You don't need to expand it. It's already infinite. You are trying to remove from it the artificial limitations imposed by thoughts. And how do you do that? You look without thinking. Experience directly. What am I actually experiencing now? And when you look, you'll find I'm experiencing the sense of there being kind of this energy pattern here, but there's nothing in that energy pattern that tells me that I stop here. Matter of fact, I'm aware of things on the other side of it. Well, wait, how's that? Right? Because the senses and being, but wait a minute. My experience is nothing but a whole bunch of stuff in my consciousness. Not anything outside of I don't experience anything out of that, out of consciousness. Coming in and out of existence constantly. Yeah. Some things seem to be a little bit more static than others, but it's constantly, this is what's happening. When I really look at it, I cannot find a boundary. And the only reason that becomes difficult is because we've been so indoctrinated that we are our bodies. You are compressed within this skull. That the mind just doesn't want to let go. I say, well, yeah, but, and it's going to constantly do that, right? Because that's what we've been trained to believe. So even though the evidence, your direct evidence for it, is that there isn't a boundary, the mind will keep saying, oh, there must be there somewhere, right? We just haven't found it yet. It must be there somewhere. Eventually you get to the point where you trust your direct experience more than you trust your beliefs, and you realize, no, there isn't a boundary there. Consciousness is not confined within this body, any more than the radio signal is confined to the radio that is voicing it. How's that, Petey? Hindu full-leaded. Gee, never believed in any god, but now I feel like I'm being held and guided gently through good times and bad to a destination unknown. Which meditation is most effective in increasing space? Well, yeah, you've never believed in any god, which is good. You've never believed in any personal god, right? Somebody up, a super being up there manipulating things. But you have become aware of a benevolence, of being held, being gently guided through good times and bad times. Now, from the point of view of an identification with the separate self, that can become kind of a God figure, or it can become, my angel guides or my spirit guides. That sense is real. We misidentify it, right? It's not really spirit guides or angel guides. It's our true nature. It is the reality of you. It is grace. It is truth calling itself back home to itself. And that unknown destination is truth, right? It is your true home. It's your reality. It's who you really are. That's what the calling is. The meditation for increasing space, well, first, what I just said, that inquiry that I just said, to recognize that this influence that is holding you and guiding you gently, right, is within you. This is grace. This is the I am. This is the God within, the immanent God, right? And it's only a God because we're identified still with the form, right? But the fact that you're open to coming to know the true self, which God is just another word for the true self, right? That voice becomes very benevolent because who is it? Well, it's actually the reality of you. And it is the reality of you clearing away the illusion of you. And the illusion of you is just a bunch of thoughts that have identified with the form. But there's nobody there. There's nobody actually being called home, right? What's really happening is the false idea of being a separate self is dissolving. And as that happens, we feel more drawn to this. We feel more, the universe is more benevolent. We notice the synchronicities. But don't stop there. Don't stop there. Right? Because, and it's a good place. It's the path of the bhakti. You can be very devoted to this. But to take it to the next level, you see that that which is calling you is the reality of you, because God is another word for truth, is another word for reality. So it is the truth of you that is calling you to this unknown destination. Unknown because it's yourself, the thing we seem to know the least. So to meditate, excuse me, I get water. To meditate on that what you're really experiencing is the truth of your being, what you are being called to, then the meditation becomes a refocusing of attention away from thoughts and feelings and sensations, away from all of our identifications, and directing it as deeply inward as we can go into this place of simply quiet, pure existence. That is the ultimate meditation. You are meditating on the meditator. You are aware of being aware, because that awareness, that consciousness, that I amness, that is the true self. That is God. So to meditate on that is to merge into it. Right? So when you sit, who is it that's sitting? It is that is sitting. Everything you do when you're washing dishes, who's washing the dishes? That is washing the dishes. The truth is always the one washing the dishes. Right? You following? You following what I'm saying here? Let the sense of identity return back to that place from which you've sensed being held and guided. Move yourself to it until you merge with it. You disappear into it. Right? It isn't like you and a God. You disappear, and all there is the God. Father, replace me with you. Right? It's a beautiful poem by a 12th century Chinese mystic named Lin Po. It's a very short poem. It's one of my favorites ever. And it goes, "The bird disappears into the sky. The cloud dissolves and drains. We sit together, the mountain and I, until only the mountain remains." Ponder that. We sit in meditation until there is no meditator. KT says, thank you for your time. You're very welcome. Thank you for yours. Nawaf. Did I pronounce that correct? Nawaf Aliorani. Hi GP, this is Nawaf from Saudi Arabia. I have a question. Who are the best teachers to listen to, and what are the essential books to read on the awakening or non-duality? Well, I've said it before, the teachers that I recommend, Muji, who is my teacher, Rupert Spira, Francis Lucille, Adyashanti, and Gangaji. There's a few others that I've seen that I kind of like. This young woman named Lisa Cairns. It sounds very correct, what she's saying. And they're popping up all over the place because consciousness is exploding. More than expanding, it's absolutely exploding. If you're new to the whole non-duality thing, the books from Muji are very good. Listening to his satsangs are very good. Doing his invitation is very good. My first encounter with real strict Advaita, real Advaita, was Nisargadatta Maharaj and the book I Am That. which has become a classic. Talks with Ramana Maharshi, also very, very good. Um, Various sutras of the Buddha, the Heart Sutra, uh, the Lankavatara Sutra, the Avadut Gita is another great one. Um, but don't put too much stock in the books. Um, Listen to the teachers. To listen to the teachers is much better because you get the spirit of it. Because there's a lot of people out there teaching non-duality who, for my money, don't have the spirit of it, which is why those ones that I've mentioned do. There's an energy of heart about it that I don't find in a lot of Advaita teachers. So that's I think that's probably a good place for you to start on it. But again, spend more time. If you read one of these, it took me a long time to read I Am That because it was so concentrated. There was so much there that I'd read a sentence and I'd be stunned, and I would just sit with it for a couple of days, sometimes a couple hours. So it's not like you're reading to gain information. You're reading to become pointed towards something that is just so subtle that we miss it. But it's in you, it's with you, it's part of it is you. So it is self-discovery. It is not the gaining of knowledge, which is why I'm always reluctant to recommend books and the like, because it's easy for us to get wrapped up in them. This is the direct gaining of self-awareness and self-knowledge. It is not book learning. It is not something to repeat back, which is why the emphasis for me is always in the heart, to feel it, to just kind of feel your own sense of existence, and then recognize that that sense of existence is a completely different substance than everything that makes up my experience, which is thought, sensation, and emotion in various shades and vibrations. So hopefully that will set you nicely on the path there, Nawaf. Oh, Ava and Hindu Folletta having a little conversation. Good. 8.08. This is quite mind-blowing. Oh, good. Good. Let's blow it up completely. KT says, "Hey GP, I was out with a friend recently, and for a split second I had a feeling of nothingness, empty, and it made me fearful. Can you please offer any advice?" Yeah, it's a perfectly normal reaction, right? You've spent your whole life, right, devoted to making the ego into something, right? I did as well, right? I want to be somebody, score something big, do something magnificent, get a lot of pats on the back and the like, started out by wanting to be a rock star and, on and on it goes. The idea of, and I remember a couple of times just really confronting, what if none of that ever happens? What's left? You invest your whole energy in trying to be somebody. So as I began to explore it more deeply, I recognized that impulse to become something is what keeps us stuck in Shiva's wheel lifetime after lifetime. That's what's uncomfortable in between lifetimes, which is why we re-identify with yet another form. And Buddha said that the three causes of suffering were attachment and aversion, that is, wanting what you don't have, right? Trying to avoid what you don't want, and becoming. Wanting to get rid of, and wanting to become. So with that energy, an experience of simply being can feel empty. There's nothing here for me, which is that default sense of me. And it can become very fearful, and it wants to grab onto something, and I'm sure it does. That's why it only lasts a split second. All of a sudden, it's back up again, identifying or doing something. Don't worry about it. The advice: don't make a big deal out of it. Notice that it's happening and go, okay, it made me fearful. Okay, wait a minute, hold on. There was the experience of nothingness. I was there, right? And I wasn't fearful. And then all of a sudden, this fear popped up. A feeling of fear popped up against this background of the emptiness. Now, did the emptiness go anywhere? Did the nothingness get replaced by this fear? Or did it appear in it? That nothing, that emptiness you're referring to, it doesn't get pushed out of the way. You know, if I move my hand from here to over here, I'm not pushing the space out of the way, am I? Right? I'm moving through the space. The space is completely unmoved by it. The action, movement of my hand doesn't leave a trace in it, right? So the appearing of fear is only appearing to the emptiness, right? And then when that feeling of fear appears, what happens next? This all happens I'm running the whole thing now in slow motion, right? What actually happens, it happens very quickly, right? There's the recognition of nothingness, right? And in that nothingness, there's no fear. There can't be. You wouldn't be recognizing it. Immediately, something reacts to that doesn't like the nothing. The habit pattern that doesn't like the nothing. It's fear. It wants to move away from it. And then immediately after that, there's this feeling, I'm afraid. Also appearing. Now look, there was nothing, then just a feeling, and then the thought, I'm afraid. Right? And that thought, I'm afraid, couldn't have happened if the fearful feeling didn't happen first, right? So the feeling was there, of fear was there, even when there was nobody feeling it, right? There was nobody taking ownership of it. Right? So that nothingness you were feeling was the true being. It's not nothing. It's emptiness, right? Now, you've maybe heard me say this before. The meaning of empty, our word in English, emptiness, and the meaning we have on it, and you know, common parlance means nothing. There's nothing there. It's empty, right? You know, or my life is empty. It has no meaning or anything like that. This isn't that, right? What it means is it's empty of defining characteristics, right? It is, but it is not stuck in any particular form, right? It is the word shunyata, from which the word emptiness is translated, at least in the Buddhist text, means a pregnant emptiness. It is an emptiness just bursting with potential, right? So while the potential has not taken a form yet, the possibility for that form is very much present. So it's not nothing, right? It is the potential for everything. That's your being, the potential for everything, right? And the only way you can have the potential for everything is that you are nothing in particular. You follow that? Because if I'm something in particular, I'm stuck with it. But if I'm nothing in particular, then every moment I'm fresh. Every moment I can appear as anything. Every moment can become a universe in and of itself, right? And then just as quickly disappear, and it's no big deal to me, right? Because I am empty. I am not stuck anywhere. I am not conformed to anything. That's the emptiness. That emptiness is what you are seeking. That emptiness is freedom, right? It is freedom from being stuck in any position, stuck in any form, right? But to the mind, to that sense of us identified with the mind, because it doesn't see anything there, it says, I am nothing. Who's that I that's nothing? That I that's nothing is nothing. It's just a thought. And the feeling of fear arises. Okay, so what? A feeling of fear is present. Sit with it for a moment, and it'll go away, because nothing stays forever, except you. Right? You will outlast any feeling. Just don't give it any meaning. Don't give it any special identity. Don't think, I'm fearful. There's just this feeling that arose. And who am I? I am that which is aware of it arising. So I'm bigger than it. I'm beyond it. I'm greater than any fear. Because it couldn't arise without me. It can't just go out and be fear walking down the street. It is completely integrated into this system here. Without me, it doesn't exist. So who am I? Take away all thought, emotion, sensation, all definitions, past, memory, future, anticipations, aspirations, associations. Take all of it away, and what's left? Pure emptiness, or pure infinite being. How's that, KT? Ivan Ivanovich, Ianchev. Lately, thanks to you and Muji, I feel the self more and more, but it feels so subtle. And the ego attachment is so gross. It's like a feather in a stormy sea. So hard to stay on the surface. Well, then don't stay on the surface. Just sink into it. Just let go. Try to stay on the surface. Just let go. See what happens. See if it can actually sink you. Or if it's just got you convinced that it can. Right? Right. Our focus of attention has been outward for lifetimes. Right? Okay. And so when we do start focusing our attention inward, and you start to feel the self, which is just the presence of your own existence with nothing extra added, it's going to feel quite mild, quite subtle compared to the blah blah blah, the noise of the mind and the ego. But that will shift. That will shift over time. Like a feather in a stormy sea. It's only a feather in a stormy sea because you're trying to hold on to the self, right? Well, who would it be that would be holding on to the self? One trying to hold on to it is one that doesn't think it's that. So, isn't the subtlety and the one trying to hold on and the feather in the stormy sea, are they not all being perceived by exactly the same thing? And what's that? Is that not the self? As I said, the seeking and the seeker are both being perceived by that which is sought. So you aren't feeling the self. The self is feeling the self. Only the self knows the self. Only God knows God. Only truth knows truth. Only consciousness knows consciousness. So it is the self that is feeling the self more and more. Right? It is the self that recognizes the subtlety. It is the self that says the ego attachment is so gross, like a feather in a stormy sea. It's the self that recognizes the one trying to hold on to the self, the one that thinks itself is a feather in the stormy sea. It says it's so hard to stay on the surface. It's the self that sees that. It's the self that recognizes it. Right? There's nothing but the self. That's all there is. Right? Only awareness is aware, right? You can't have something else aware of awareness, right? Only awareness is aware. So who's aware of my words right now? The self. The actual self. If you want to put it in religious terms, God. Who's hearing my words right now? God is hearing my words. The I am. Is there another I am? Is there this other I am trying to get to the I am? Say, oh God, it's so subtle. It's like a feather in a stormy sea. Is there another I am? I'm going to get to the I am. I'm going to get to the I am. Can't be two of them. There's only the I am. And then there's this thought that says, I'm not that. Well, what made that thought true? Nothing. It's not true. It is simply a thought appearing to the I am. That's that feeling of being the self. That's what it is. That's simply your feeling yourself. But I can see that there's a slight thing that there's still this you feeling the self. Right? It's the self feeling the self. Because that's all there is. There isn't two of them. Right? A self over here, another one over here. Oh, I feel you. Oh, you feel good. Notice, it's completely a construct in the mind, isn't it? Who's feeling the self? The self is. I got it. 20 minutes more here. Let me see how we got. Salams from Arizona. Dervish Ataman. Hi, Dervish. Have you been here before? I don't think I recognize your name. Max P. How can I let go of the ego, or let's say surrender? Is it by realizing I was never in it? Yep. Yes. Yes. How can I let go of the ego? It is the ego that wants to let go of the ego. It's defined itself, right? This is me, and I'm struggling with the ego. I got to get rid of the ego. So what is that? That's the ego. The ego is just nothing but thought patterns. Any thought pattern that references a self that is not the self is the egoic mind. So you don't have to surrender, right? You simply have to see that you're not that it is just a thought. So you can't even surrender, right? And there's nobody to surrender. There is simply this awareness. And there's a sense of being separated from it. And so we think, my ego's in the way. How do I let go of the ego? Okay. Who's the I that wants to let go of it? Is that I not something subtle, but isn't it something being perceived by something else? That something else is you, right? So even that I that wants to let go of the ego is itself being viewed by something deeper. And the I that realizes it was never it, well, you can put it that way, right? But the I that realizes I was never that, right, is not the I that's trying to. Right? That which realizes it was never that is the self. Not someone who realizes it. There's nobody there to realize that. The idea that there's somebody who doesn't realize it is just a thought. That there's somebody, a self-conscious entity, that doesn't know who it is. It's a picture in the mind. It's a picture being witnessed by what? By the only thing there is. The awareness. Be the awareness. Be yourself. As Ramana would put it, abide in the self. Papaji would just say, be quiet and be with this. Right? See so clearly that the ego is simply a pattern of thought and does not exist, that trying to surrender or trying to let go of it or trying to even release the idea that you were ever it becomes just unthinkable, becomes almost absurd. I gotta keep going so I can see if I can get through all of these today. The ego hates the grave. Oh, yes, it does. Because he can't see beyond it. Lex says, if I is really not a thing, why not just carry on as usual? Well, who carries on as usual, Lex? Who? Who is it that would carry on as usual? See, life is carrying on as usual. It's just doing what life does. Right? As Nisargadatta said, I allow my human life to fulfill its destiny. I remain as I am. There is a flow of life that's happening, right? So it is carrying on as usual. That's what it's always doing. It always has and it always will, right? The sense that there's somebody doing it is what is the illusion, and that's what dissolves. So that I is not really a thing. It's just a thought projected on the functioning of life. And so it doesn't carry on because it never carried in the first place. Right? To see that that's not that isn't who you are, that I doesn't exist, simply harmonizes your sense of self with the whole functioning of the universe. And now the entire universe is the I. The entire universe is your body. The entire universe is functioning in lockstep. It is one single essential beingness that is constantly unfolding, and it is, you could think of it as the universal I, or God, but even that is a slight reduction of it. So the I isn't a thing, right? So if the I is really seen through, there's nothing left to carry on as usual. And now life is seen simply as it is. In just the way that you see your body as functioning, for the most part, for almost exclusively, without any input on your part. 99.999% of the events happening in your body, you have no control over whatsoever. You are just a participant. You're hanging out. To see that, you simply extend that. That's true of everything that happens in the universe. Happens of everything that everybody does. Every thought, every emotion, every sensation is this cosmic event. It is simply this one big functioning. And there's no I doing it. That removes all the responsibility. It removes the pressure. It removes the fear. Right? Oh, this is just happening. And I am the consciousness in which it is happening. I am not one element in the middle of it, struggling, trying to make it come out the way I think it should. And that frees life to be seen as it actually is. And when you do, you find it to be completely and utterly benevolent and loving. Ape says, I'm interested in that too. Is that about Lex's question? I think so, anyway. I used to have a psychedelic phase. Good. Let's see. Oh, it's October. Paul, hold on. Oh, my goodness. There we go again. It jumped away on me. Muji is great. Yep, he surely is. Oh, good Lord. I'm getting a ton of questions here now. Oh, dear, 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 dear. Look at this. Hello from Monterey. Hello. I mean, there's no goal on the path of truth? I'm reluctant to put out statements like that, because somebody who's new on the path will go, oh, there's no goal, and they'll try to get rid of goals. Of course, as we are growing spiritually, our worldly goals of attainment and or success and family, whatever our worldly attainments are, which are goals that we pursue in our life, they become less and less important, and the goal of finding what's actually true becomes more and more important. Eventually, that matures to the point where you realize that it's not an end result that we're seeking. What we're seeking is to clear away the veil that keeps us from seeing what's actually here right now. And then there's a recognition that it's not really a goal, right? Because there's nothing to achieve in the sense of a goal. That it's a realization of what's always been. So that's why I don't just go say, no, there's no goal on the path of truth. I know teachers who do that, and while it's technically correct, it is pedagogically quite incorrect, because depending on who's hearing that could cause them a lot of pain. It could cause them a lot of work. Actually delay the awakening by trying to force yourself into a position that you really haven't grown into yet. In the beginning, it appears as if we have to make effort to discover the truth. Eventually you realize that no effort was really ever made, and that the one who appeared to be making the effort was an illusion, and that it was simply truth, unfolding truth to itself. So, again, I'm speeding up here a little bit. Thanks, GP, says Jess. You're welcome. Damn, if McKenna says it, I got that. Volume seems low still. A bit louder would be nice. I've really pushed this thing pretty far. That's a super strange whoa. Set and setting as well as intention, of course, are key. Yeah, great insight. Can't experience truth through the ego. Truth is the absence of the ego, correct? The only thing that exists is I am. Yes, now really see that. Really see that that is the only thing that exists. That's your focus, that's your meditation, that is where your attention goes. That is the doorway, at least for you, not necessarily for everyone. October Paul. Hi GP, sorry coming late. I was wondering, how do you feel about living in an ashram? Well, it's an individual thing. For some people, I think it'd be an appropriate thing. For others, no. It would be really an individual kind of thing. There's no panacea, right? Okay, I know if I go into a monastery, then I'm going to attain awakening faster. Not really true, right? There's an intuition we all have. Your life, the way you're living it right now, is your ashram, right? This is your koan. This is the monastery, right? These are inner places. The ashram, the sad ashram, right? Like the sad guru is within. We might meet a guru and have a conversation with them, and they will direct our path, right? They may even be a guru for a very, very long time. It may be very, very quick. But what it really is the truth of you, within you, is finding ways to communicate to you. So it'll appear as someone on the outside, the external guru, but that external guru, if they're real, is always pointing you to the guru inside. And so the ashram represents a withdrawing from the normal goals and interests and pursuits of everyday life, to go into a sacred place. You don't have to go to India and go to some ashram to do that. In some instances, I think it's worthwhile. I think people should go on retreats. Take some time that is completely dedicated to an inner focusing. Do you need to do that as a way of life and join a monastery or an ashram? It really is very, very individualized. Oftentimes, and you got to be careful, because oftentimes these ashrams, they come with their own rules, and they have very strict ways of doing things. They usually represent some kind of a tradition, as all monasteries do. If you realize that what it is actually simply a conscious endeavor to withdraw attention out of the world and all of its distractions and into this inner world of self-discovery, which is the simple sense of your own being and exploring the magnitude of that, do that and you're in the ashram. You're in the monastery. And you can do that right here and right now. Hi GP and all, from David and Elaine, joining you very late. Didn't realize the change in time for us. Yeah, it caught a lot of people. Happy birthday, GP, for you. Thank you. Thank you. Another lap around the sun completed. Chris Skills, hello GP. Realizing that this is just how it is, this is what consciousness does, end of story. Sounding nihilistic, but it's true. Whatever seems to be happening, there's nothing we can do about it. This is how consciousness is manifesting. Yes, but when you say there's nothing we can do about it, there's kind of this sense that you wish you could do something about it. That we have to really explore our disagreement with the way things are, and wanting them to be different, and take that with a certain degree of perspective. because that doesn't mean, okay, I stopped trying to change anything in my life. Don't do that. There's an active engagement in life that has to be there. That has to be there as well. But there's also a letting go of one's ideas as to how things should be, because that's where the ego lives. That place where the ego has decided, I don't like this and it should be different, that's where it lives. So it's not nihilistic, but it's not just saying there's nothing we can do about it, because that's not completely true. There's simply a certain surrender to the inevitability of some things, right? And to recognize that our argument with that is the actual cause of suffering, right? So it becomes this flow, right? That I'm not just saying, yeah, whatever happens, right? Or this aggressive trying to make things turn out, massive action, make things turn out the way I want them to, right? So you have that, complete and total, everything's okay the way it is, everything's perfect the way it is, all the way up to, success at any cost. It's this, right? There are things happening in the world and things happening, that happen in my life that, no, I don't want that, right? Now, if there's nothing I can do about it, there'll be times, there'll be places, and there'll be music blaring or something, right? And I like my quiet. So at first, is there anywhere I can go to get out of this? Okay, there isn't. All right, let it go. So it just goes through me, right? So it's not that we don't acknowledge that we have preferences and likes and dislikes and the like. It's just they don't run the show. They don't dominate, right? They are they're our servants and not our masters. There's always going to be preferences for this and that, but it isn't the kind of a thing, well, there's nothing I can do about it. It's like, there's a wisdom and an order in life that is bigger than I can fathom, and I'm going to participate as much as I can. I'm going to bring as much wisdom and light as I possibly can, and then I'm going to let it go. Because the ultimate authority is the truth, and it's way beyond my individual sense of what that could be. Awareness says, GP, if I get the coronavirus because of my health issues, I will probably die. How should I prepare for that? Thanks. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And it's really a question everybody here could ask, right? I'm more susceptible than others because I'm elderly, right? I'm in very good health, but I'm older, so I'm more susceptible to it as well. Here's the question: how shall I prepare to die? And I don't think anybody should wait until something is threatening before you ask yourself that question. How should you prepare for death? Mooji calls death one of God's best ideas, and I really agree with it. Right? When our everyday life has hanging over it the absolute, undeniable fact that it's going to end, and if that's really accepted into the heart, it shifts our perception dramatically. Are you going to end? No. Right? And we can explore that, and I have numerous times in all sorts of videos and all sorts of things, what happens when you die? Nothing. To you, right? Everything happens to this form, to this body. But as I said before, how did you prepare to die as an adolescent and be reborn, as a sexual young adult, right? When we go through puberty, it's a huge shift, right? That little child isn't there anymore. Completely new creature comes into existence. And I'm watching it happen with my granddaughter. There's these key moments where, boy, somebody brand new has just appeared, right? There's this constant growth, and and uh, we could see that individual that we knew and loved died. Now, the physical form didn't die. Well, it did, right? Because the physical form is constantly replenishing itself. So millions of times a second, this body is dying and being reborn. Not all at once, right? But parts at a time, right? So with that kind of going on, what is death? Right? The death, this death that we're talking about is that moment when you simply have to let go of everything you think you are. That's what they would say in Zen, die before you die. Let go of everything you think you are now, which means die now, right? And this other death will become a non-event. Right? So what's different? In that moment, you are forced to let go of everything. In that moment, all of this falls away. The senses are gone, the experience is gone, that everything's gone. And in a while, even your memory of it will be gone, right? It'll persist a little bit in between lives, but eventually that too will be gone. You don't remember, right? Little flickers every now and then, or we can do a past life regression, and some little flicker will come up. You can do some EVT or inner reconciliation with people, something will come up from a past. But for the most part, that entire life, which meant as much to you, maybe more than this life does, right? At the time, it was everything. You were that person. Maybe it was great, maybe it was horrible, maybe you were happy to see it go, maybe you were sad to see it go, but how much, you remember what? Nothing. And how many of them were there, right? Remember nothing. So let's not be so attached to this life, because it is facing the same destiny. Well, then what's the point of all this, right? Well, the point of it is to find the timeless in the now, to find the reality of you here and now, so that no matter what form you happen to be in, the reality of you is still here, expressing itself. You know, in one life, I always use the example of a musician. You know, you can play the same song on a flute and it sounds one way, a cappella another way, right? On a piano another way, full orchestra another way, rock band another way, right? Any ensemble, same song, very different mode of expression, very different experience. Well, think of every single life you've had as simply an instrument through which you, that song, has sung itself. Right? And so this life will pass, but you won't. So this moment then, this moment, it's not going to be remembered. Right? So what do we bring to it? Well, I say we bring to it just a wonder of the uniqueness and extraordinariness of this moment. The fact that it is temporary and it's going to disappear at some point makes this moment all the more precious. And then I ask, okay, well, what of me can I bring to this moment? What can I express in this moment? What can I give to this moment? Because this moment will pass away, but I won't. And what's my function in life? To give. I give this moment everything it has. Everything I can possibly give it. Everything this form is capable of expressing. Right? And then I just have to let it go. So that's how you prepare to die. I'm prepared to die. I know the next second is not guaranteed. Right? Now, I also take good care of myself. I was at the gym this morning, right? I like to work out. I eat well, right? But that's no guarantee. That's no guarantee. Right? Preparation for death is to the recognition and the identification with that in you which never dies. And that which in you never dies is the same as that which is in me that never dies. So ultimately, nothing and no one is ever really lost. So, Sharantub. There are periods of identifying, fighting with fears, thoughts, and feelings. These periods are stopped by instances of self-forgiveness, and after that, periods of clear seeing of what I am not. But the cycle restarts. It does feel like it's getting easier and easier. I've had the feeling that it is just happening and this process can't be sped up. Is this right? Yeah, don't try to speed it up. Yeah. The attempt to try to speed it up is simply the ego saying, come on, let's get on. The ego's got some idea as to what it's going to get, right? Instead of, but you're just here with, you're seeing it. You're seeing there's a cycle going on. Now remember, there was a time identifying, fighting with fears and all that stuff, when you were so identified with it that you couldn't see that it was happening, right? You were in it, right? You can't see from there. Right? You're seeing it, which means you're not in it anymore. And what happens? Self-forgiveness arises. Oh my God, look at that. It's not me. And then there's this clear seeing, right? And now something veils that, right? And you say it's not clear seeing, but are you not clearly seeing the absence of clear seeing? This isn't just a clever play on words, right? I want to show you that the seeing has never been veiled. Right? So in one moment, you're aware of this clarity, this crystal clarity. Everything makes sense. In the next moment, you're aware of this confusion. It's muddled. Nothing makes sense. What's the seeing? What's the real truth here? What's being seen or the actual seeing? That seeing is never unclear. It's only our identification with an identity that prefers this clear seeing over this muddled seeing. Right? Step behind that so that you don't care. It doesn't matter to you whether it's clear or confused. What effect does that have on you? This is the transcendent place, the actual non-dual place. It is beyond all opposites. So it is not just the clear side, right? It's the whole of it. And that is the ultimate clarity that is always crystal clear, but unconcerned about what happens to be appearing or disappearing on the screen. It knows itself to be sitting in the audience. Dale says, hello from a warm and sunny day in Massachusetts. My wife Boo says, hi, GP. Hi, Boo. Pleasure. Mary Sykes, is life designed for us to think we are our bodies, thoughts, and emotions? Is it all a game of coming in and out of what is real? No. Life is not designed for us to think or be anything. Life is just life. Life is just doing what it's doing. And part of what it does is produce bodies and thoughts and emotions and that entire experience. That experience is what we call life. In fact, it is simply consciousness aware of itself. And within that arises a sense of self, also being perceived by consciousness. Right? So, is it all a game of coming in and out of what is real? You can't come in and out of what is real. Right? Because what is real is real. That's what's true. That's what's here. So you can't come in and out of it. You can only believe yourself to be coming in and out of it, right? And that's the dream. That is the illusion. That's the game. Something believes that it's coming in and out of it. But what it's coming in and out of, the reality it believes itself to be coming in and out of, is the reality that is perceiving it coming in and out, right? And you notice yourself going in, you notice yourself going out. Well, what's noticing that? And is what's noticing that going in and out? This is the whole of it, right? We see something happening on the screen. It feels a certain way to us. It feels worse rather than better. And we think, oh, I've gotten stuck in it again. No, you're not. Reality is still perceiving it. This is always the case. This is the simplicity of it. It's always the same. There's always this place from which all of it is being perceived, and that is not in anything that's being perceived. It is completely free of it. It has no preference for any particular part of it. It is the pure experience of it. Let your sense of self come back there, and these questions will simply become less and less pressing for you. Right? Am I coming in and out of reality? Well, be the reality. Right? And then watch what comes in and out and see if it affects you. Right? You see, the thing is, we all are thinking of ourselves as seekers on a path. And that's a phase of our experience we have to go through. That's part of the deal. But eventually you see that even the seeker and the seeking are being perceived by something more subtle. And then it becomes less about the seeker and the seeking and more about what is it that's perceiving even that. And it's very subtle. You just keep stepping back till you can't step back any further. And how do you know you can't step back any further? Because you can't perceive anything at all. See, as long as we're still trying to perceive something or someone, we're still reaching for an object. But when you come to the place where I cannot see myself, right, you've reached the end. That's it. Because the ultimate perceiver cannot be perceived. It is shapeless, formless, timeless, spaceless. It is non-physical, yet it permeates absolutely everything. So it cannot be known as one object knowing another. The I cannot see itself. The self cannot see itself directly as an object. It just is itself. So that feeling of being is the whole of it. That isn't a step along the way. That feeling of being is the knowing. It's the ultimate knowing, because nothing beyond that can be perceived. That knowing is the ultimate perceiving. That's the end of the road. The mind won't agree with that. yeah, that's great, but what about... But that's okay. That's okay. Anne said, had a friend who had death experience twice, where had choice, wanted to return as identity is now or as another, or to stay. How does it fit with true self? Got she was one choosing no God as such. Well, the true self, all of that's an experience. A death experience is an experience. It can be a profound one, like plant medicines, that somebody mentioned earlier. Deeply profound. It can transform one's entire life in an instant. But it's still an experience. Right? And in this experience, she would say she made a choice to return as one person or another. Right? But the actual experience of her in between, in this near-death experience, making a choice, right, was also experienced. Right? By what? So that which witnesses the in-between lives, that which is this life, the choices, the coming in, the going out, right? Who's the ultimate witness? That is the true self. The true self is not something out there that you get to. It is the truth of yourself, right? And where do you find it? Well, you find it here. Where else are you going to look? So just kind of stripping away everything that's obviously not you till you end up with what? What is you? What you cannot strip away. What's left must be you. Even if we die with a sense of a sense of a personal self intact, that will be there in between lives. It'll take up the next one. But if this body ceases and that hasn't been the case, well, it's a completely different. Then all of this falls away, and there's just the infinite consciousness, which is impossible to describe, by the way. So, right. The best we can do is to spot where we are identifying, because the one who's doing the identification, if you can identify them, they too are being perceived. But the one who is actually ultimately perceiving cannot be known. You cannot perceive yourself. A knife cannot cut itself. A finger can't touch itself. This is our insight and our pointer to the nature of the ultimate perceiver, which is you. Because aren't you the ultimate perceiver? Right? Aren't you the one? Within the context, at least, of your own experience, is there another perceiver here? Or is it just you? Well, then that must be it. That must be the self. AG, much love to you during your birthday weekend, Sarah in France. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Yep, another lap around the sun. 68 of them so far. Mary Sykes, I've studied some teachings that not all humans are created by God, making them mechanization man or so-called soulless one. This teaching has created such fear in me, especially if there are negative thoughts and feelings that reinforce the thoughts and beliefs around this teaching. Any thoughts on this? Yeah, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Can I put it more bluntly? Yeah. I mean, either God made everything or not, right? So you can't say that, he made some, these are not all humans are created by God. They're created. There's a whole bunch of stuff. In early Christianity, there was a bunch of different competing ideas. Some of them were like this. Some of the Gnostic ones were like that. Some weren't. Some were more non-dual. That there was a lesser God, and in fact that Yahweh was one of the lesser gods who created these, and we have modern versions of that. People who say that there are some hybrids, that some of the people are actually reptile beings from other planets. It's all nonsense, right? It's all nonsense. The ego is mechanistic, right? The sense of identity that is not real being, but is just the belief of a being, is completely robotic and mechanistic. The human nervous system is robotic, right? That is, it simply reacts in the way it was programmed to react. There's not a single human being on the planet who does not have the capability to become aware of that. That is our humanness, right? Without that, awakening would not be possible. So this element that allows us to recognize the robotic nature of the human nervous system, how things get programmed, to see that I am now reacting unconsciously, and to see that means I have become, to a certain degree, conscious, right? Which means I've stepped into a different place of seeing, right? How did that happen? Oftentimes we can't really tell. Something in us wakes up. But every human being has that capacity. Will every human being exercise it in this lifetime? Probably not. And there's plenty of people, they're running countries. You hear what I have to say about people running countries. They would seem to be subhuman. All that means is they are completely acting out their programming. Like a dog, right? There is no consciousness there that is aware that it is a program. They think they're making choices and they're powerful and all of this, and on all this kind of stuff. So there's no need to be afraid of that. People are just conscious or unconscious, and different degrees of the consciousness. Now, people who are unconscious are dangerous. Let's face it. It is an enormous amount of unconsciousness that has the United States spending more money on weaponry and warfare than any country in the history of the world. More than the next 26 countries combined, right? That's insane, right? That is the ego run wild, right? Completely draining all the resources of the country to make war, right? That's the ego. That is this subhuman, right? Because human happens when conscious recognition takes place. Before that, we're not really human. We're the human animal because we have the potential for it, whereas like a dog or a cat or a wallaby doesn't, right? And they're just acting out their own instincts, but because they're just acting out their instincts, they're still in balance with nature and in harmony and that sort of stuff, and they're innocent, right? So are us humans, the human animal, which has no idea that it's simply acting out the way it was programmed, right? When that consciousness begins to dawn, that this is just a program that I am acting out, what happened there? There's nothing in the program to make that happen. Right? There's nothing in the program that could do that. Something wakes up that is beyond just the human animal. Something has connected us to the possibility for spiritual life. In this course I've been doing on the chakras, I have my own model of the chakras that I use to try to go into depth some of this stuff. But the traditional diagram of the chakra that everybody's seen, you know, the person in lotus position, and there's the red light at the base of the spine, and the light's moving up to the chest, to the heart chakra, and up to the crown. Now, traditionally, I think that's most the tradition of the Kundalini model, which is the one that's common on all the posters and the like. It's also traditionally shown with a pair of snakes that are coiled around the center line, right? Now, the beauty of that is the snakes mythologically represent resurrection. They represent immortality, because the snake literally sheds its skin, right, and becomes a completely new creature. So the chakras, that model, it's not that there's actually these swirling vortexes of light there. It represents this ascension of consciousness from the purely instinctual, or unconscious, up through the spiritual. It is the birth of spiritual life. That's what it symbolizes. And that this symbol, and that the intersection and the point of resurrection is the heart, which is also, of course, the place where Christ was crucified. The symbol of the cross is represented there, past, future, heaven, and earth. The intersection is this, the instinctual and the purely spiritual. So what's happening is that consciousness, as it awakens, both individually and universally, passes through these phases where it becomes aware of the instinctual nature. Now, as that happens, it can become very chaotic. This is the space of the Kali Yuga. This is where the ego goes absolutely crazy, drunk with its own power, because it has been divorced from that nature, but it has not anchored itself in anything real. So it is making a world in its own likeness. And that is the world of pain, suffering, ignorance, cruelty, barbarity, on an unprecedented scale. But this is the birth pangs. Because what's happening is consciousness is become liberated from the unconscious impulse of the animal instincts, and is basically beginning to open its wings for the infinite possibility of our actual nature. So I hope that puts your heart a little bit at ease on that, Mary. Ape says, Muji is great. I agree. And I am, oh my goodness, happy birthday. Thank you, Dorothy. Happy birthday from Jay. Let me look through some of these questions here, because it is well over the time. I'm staying on a little bit longer, as I know people showed up late, because it's very confusing, the whole time change things. Wow, Ape says, I have these thoughts about death, although I'm 19. Good time to start. Yeah, I did too. I actually had them when I was very young. I remember 4 or 5, pondering what happens. I just could not conceive oblivion. I couldn't do it, even though I wasn't all that smart. I wasn't all that. I was just a kid, little kid. But these thoughts bubble up, right? Because there's a deeper wisdom in all of us. Just because you're 5 or 19 doesn't mean this wisdom isn't available to you. It is, because it's timeless, and it doesn't care how old the body is. Thank God. Let's see here. Dave says, okay, you just answered it. Thanks, GP. You're welcome. Dear GP, thank you. Love, Sophie. Dave Rose, I have a same problem with Max B. I know the ego really isn't a thing, but sometimes it simply can't feel like I'm not an ego. Am I doing something wrong? Yeah, just listening to those feelings. You aren't the ego. Don't worry about whether it feels that way or not, because feelings come and go, right? The place I'm inviting you to feel, that absolutely stable place, isn't a feeling, is it? When you just get in touch with your own sense of being, it's not a feeling, is it? It's not like an emotion. It's got a completely different character to it. Right? And this is an obvious thing that we can perceive. No, it isn't the same as that. Well, what is that substance? Well, nobody's going to tell you about it because nobody else, unless you're in this kind of an investigation, nobody else even knows about it. Nobody even questions it. Everybody, that's a feeling, right? But when you look close, you go, wow, it isn't a feeling. Well, what is it then? So, just answer. Good. Okay, let's see. Eli, hi Eli. Belgian refugee. I heard from oneness. It's a natural state of non-duality after realization, isn't it? Or am I missing any point? Yes, oneness is but it's more than an experience. It's a realization. What did I click on here? I'm clicking on things. It's more than a realization. And let's not try to speculate about what it would be like, right, after self-realization. Instead, focus your attention on self-realization, right? Now, what is self-realization? Go to that place where you are simply aware of your own existence, right? And explore it. This sense of existing. Is it a thought? No, it's not a thought. I'm not making it up. This isn't imaginary. It's not a visualization. It's not thought. Right? There's awareness of thought and it's going on. But this feeling of being isn't a thought. It's not a visualization. It's not imagination. I can feel it's real. Is it an emotion? No, it's not an emotion. How do I know? I know what emotions feel like. This isn't that. It's feeling. That's kind of a word for it, but it's not quite right. Oh, okay. Wow, it's very different. Is it a sensation? No, it's not really a sensation either. Well, then what is it? Does it have a boundary? Just feeling into that feeling and exploring it all by itself, does it have a boundary? Can't find a boundary. Can't find a beginning or an end. This is what you do, right? Do that, because that is the self. And the more time you spend with your true self, the more the thoughts about self begin to just kind of dissolve. They don't have as much importance anymore. They don't have as much staying power. And suddenly, not suddenly, but gradually, the sense of I starts really removing itself from all the content and what's being experienced, and starts to become more rooted in that which is beyond experience. This place where, yeah, it's not really an emotion, but it's felt. And then you just try to in that place where it's just, you're exploring, is it boundless? Notice that during the entire exploration, you are there with it. And then you go, is it, that is, this thing I'm exploring, is it different from me? Or am I actually exploring myself? That's where I want to bring into that. And at this point, it is 2.5 hours, so I am going to bring it to a close. Sorry for those of you who didn't didn't get an answer today. Oh, this one got my attention. George says, GP, how are you? Very fine, thank you. My girlfriend is pregnant and having a hard time with nausea, hormonal changes, etc. How can she find a way to deal with this and stay conscious? Well, first off, you, as her boyfriend in this, be extremely sympathetic, right? I had 2 children. Um, the man's job is to shut up and just whatever comes out, you take, right? So you be no any be create absolutely no conflict, because all the things that are happening right now inside of her are not personal towards you. If she directs something towards you, some anger or pain or sorrow, whatever, it's not personal, right? Just an enormous, like, I mean, the female body is miraculous. It's no wonder that the first figurines of deities were goddesses, right? Just the wonder of the female body that gives life and nourishes life, right? It's it's wondrous. Joseph Campbell said that women are life, men are the protectors of life. So be that, right? That's on a very practical level. Obviously, there may be some kind of uh, some medications. There can be some natural remedies. There can be some food things that might help with that. There are sources of information readily available to that. Right. Now, in terms of staying conscious, um, yeah, it can't, when there's intense stuff going on in the body, um, it can seem like it's very difficult to stay conscious. But what do you mean by that when you say, I want to stay conscious? For most people, it says, I want to stay content, I want to stay happy, I want to stay, with nothing I don't like going on. Right? That's not actually conscious. If there's a hormonal imbalance happening, right, the hormonal stuff going on, right, and you're conscious of it, you're conscious. You're conscious of the fact that right now I feel horrible. Right? That's consciousness, right? Now, that may seem like just resignation. Okay, well, I'm just going to feel like shit. Well, no, not really. You see, the less resistance there is to what you're feeling, the less suffering there is in it. Sometimes it's so much so that it can completely eliminate all of the pain that is being experienced, but not always, right? So I say, do everything you can to make her as comfortable as possible, get her everything she needs. Don't create any conflicts. She's inviting you into helping her remain conscious. Don't try to make anything different than it is. Don't add any additional story onto it. Don't say, because there are hormonal changes, I'm going to have to suffer. That's not true. Hormonal changes, true. Having to suffer because of it, not true. Right? Are they uncomfortable feelings? Perhaps. Right? Some are, some aren't. Right? The nausea and stuff, I know it sucks. Right? I mean, I don't know from that, of course. but but yeah, and you don't, and it's very natural for us to not want them to be there and to take every step we possibly can to minimize them or eliminate them. But ultimately, it simply comes to this place of surrender. This is what my body has to do in order to do what it was designed to do, and that is to bring forth a new life form. And simply surrender to the whole process. You surrender to it from your perspective, right? Which means it's the ultimate demand on you for compassion, because there isn't anything you can do about it. There's nothing to fix because there's nothing wrong, right? But to simply be present with someone, being a space of acceptance for them, right? Doing everything you can to make them feel loved and minimize the pain, you've created this most perfect environment for this thing to play itself out in the best way possible. So don't try to push things away. Don't think there's anything wrong. as best you can, whenever any of these things come up, let go of any resistance to it, right? As much as you can, because obviously you're feeling uncomfortable. The body wants to get comfortable. If you can, great. If you can't, surrender to the fact that you can't. And you'll find a certain peace there that isn't present when you're resisting or forcing or trying to push something. I think that's the best I can say about it right now. I know I skipped some questions today, folks. I'm really sorry about that. But, you know, the answer to the questions, if you haven't noticed, it's always the same. I'm always directing attention back to what is. And to experience what is without any additional stuff laid on top of it. Without any story about what it should be or what it could be or what I wish it was, right? But to just be present with what is. And what is here? What is absolutely here? Just the feeling of being. That sense of being. I want you to simply disappear in that. Let the ego disappear into that sense of being. It won't take anything away from your life. Nothing will get lost in this. You will simply be knowing yourself directly, without a story, without stress, without problems. Right? You'll simply be knowing yourself as you actually are. And when you discover who you are, who you really are, simultaneously you discover who everyone else is. Because we are all absolutely the same here. All right, folks. That's it for today. I will see you all next week. Love you all. Namaste.